Dr. Martin, and the question today is women pause. Do men pause too? Is the big question on our minds this evening. Today in the studio we have with us some products that are featured by our sponsors. We're part of this cooperative called Grenada Agro-Tourism Cooperative, and we have an opportunity for some of our producers to have their products displayed. You would see the chocolate that's particular to Grenada. We have the cocoa, right? Fresh made cocoa. We even have soap today, Dr. Martin. That's one of our sponsors, is a soap producer. And we have some other sponsors coming on board, so we're happy for your support sponsors, and we'll have a chance to feature their product in a little more detail as we move forward. But this evening, viewers, the doc and I are drinking the venerable Grenadian bush tea. So the big question, andropause is the word that we want to bring to the table this evening. Women pause. Doc, do men pause? Is what we want to consider.
Yeah. Well, while I could definitely understand the colloquialness and the Creole nature of what we're trying to talk about, underneath is a very important topic, a very important issue.
You are correct, Doctor, because from a little research that I did, I recognized that a psychoanalyst, a fellow called Elliot Jacks, coined the term midlife crisis in the 1960s.
Right.
Right? And he came up with this because there was a lot of work being done on that subject. So go on, enlighten us how these two things come together, and why it's so important for us to be broaching this subject.
And sure, because I mean, if I remember my days in medical school, the issue of menopause was very, was talked about quite a lot. And of course, as I said before, men's health focus and men's health program has been very scant, for decades. And so we're really getting into the issue of andropause is new, is current, so to speak. So yes, women do have menopause, and of course, men pause as well. It's just that ours is not menopause. So, although there is a main part of it, but it's really andropause, because when you look at the physiology of it, menopause just means the stopping of the menses,
right,
in women, and that's because of fluctuations or age-related drop in the estrogen level that makes them women. Men also have a similar issue where there's age-related drop in testosterone, and at one point it gets to a critical level in which men start actually experiencing symptoms of andropause. So yes, there is an entity called andropause, and men need to be aware of it, because it can be quite devastating for men who are not aware that this is something that they can experience. Not just for him, but for his immediate environment, his life, everything could go topsy-turvy. And so that midlife crisis that was discussed by our dear doctor there was all part of the effort of trying to get to this point where we get the world understanding that, listen, men have a crisis at some stage in their life.
All right, so my brothers, I speak to you with sincerity. There is something that affects males. I coined the word, and I thought I was being crafty, Doc. I said, well, if they call the thing that affects ladies menopause, maybe I should call it womanopause and call the one that affects men manopause. To my surprise, I looked on the internet, and indeed is a word that's being used, manopause. But proper name, andropause. It's interesting that as an educated person, I didn't know about this stuff, and I had a bout with it. That is the catalyst for this engagement. I'll share a little details as we move forward, but what I want our male folk to understand is that just as in the case of the menopause that affects women, and not every woman succumbs to debilitating experiences, we've learned that about 20% or so of males actually do experience significant symptoms, and these are things that we should be cognizant of. In our society, it causes us to rethink, is it really that all the men who end up in the rum shop are just fellas that like rum? Or maybe there's an escape because they didn't know. that and the food that we eat. So I'm looking forward for us to discuss some more about what this big pause in men really entails, right? Any comments from Dr. Corliss?
Well, I was just about to say that's why.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think one of the things that we also have to pay attention to, and Dr. Martin spoke about this, in medical training, like you said, there's a lot of focus on menopause. But we also know that historically, it doesn't matter what continent you are, men also go to the doctor less than women. And so one of the big things that I think we also have to bring to the table is how do we address that? How do we engage men more with their own health care? But also when men do go to the doctor, how do we make sure that we're asking the right questions? Because I know that oftentimes when women go to the doctor, we're poked and prodded in different ways because we do have much more hormones and they fluctuate every month. But especially with men, when we talk about erectile dysfunction, loss of libido, irritability, stress, depression, anxiety, I've asked many men the question of when you go to the doctor, what conversations are you having? What are the questions they're asking? And oftentimes they're like, they're not asking me those questions. So when we talk about the idea of andropause, and that gets into the bigger question of, developmental psychology, the lifespan, the changes that each human being goes through as they age, how do we adapt? How do we make sure that our needs are being met at later stages in life? And that requires questioning. That requires really, as individuals, being much more aware of our bodies and the changes that happen, but also being willing to talk about that in medical settings and in the community.
Right. Well, see, Dr. Collins, that's a very important observation that you've made, that, when men go to doctor, what it is they really ask the doctor for. And this goes to the back of training and education as well. We are aware that men are behind the line and we could get into the whole psychosocial reasons why men are behind, because there are genuine reasons why society has created men the way they are created. But on the backside of it, our healthcare providers themselves are not very sensitive to this issue as well. Okay. Because a man may come in, and from the time he sits with you as a physician, you have to be prepared to pull that thing out of that man. All right. Because if you don't pull it out, he's not going to get it out. That's correct. So it's not just the man refusing to have that conversation that he needs to have with the doctor. It's the doctor themselves and healthcare providers themselves also being in a position of not being judgmental, and being supportive and helpful, and understand where men are coming from. Okay. So raising this discussion then at this forum is critical for us to bring to the listening public the awareness that there are some things that men need to be aware of. Right, and questions that they need to posit to their doctor is what I'm hearing, right? And also we're saying that healthcare providers need now to be a little more acutely sensitized that there are some things you should begin to look for as you deal with your male clients. It would take us then to discuss with a little detail what are the signs and symptoms, because maybe our family may see something that could trigger. Right? Maybe men or themselves will be able to see, whether in themselves or in their partners, things that will give an indication, there is something going on here that needs attention. Right? I think this is the right time because we're seeing a preponderance of cases in prostate cancer, right? Which affects, as you explained last time, our erectile functioning. Right, and we're seeing a number of men coming down with things today that we can't quite explain. Right. I look forward to us engaging on those two questions as soon as we come back from a break, and we'll take a word from our sponsors at this time. And Doc and I will sip a little man tea. We'll tell you what the tea is when we come back from the break.
COVID-19 spreads from person to person through the droplets that are produced when someone coughs or sneezes, which makes it easy to spread between people in close contact. Now let's get prepared to stay healthy. To reduce your chance of catching or spreading COVID-19, practice these simple everyday preventative measures. Droplets can also land on surfaces, so ensure that you wash your hands frequently for a minimum of 20 seconds or sing the happy birthday song twice. Avoid touching your face, especially your eyes, nose, and mouth. If soap and water are not readily available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with an alcohol content between 60 and 90%. 70% is ideal. When you cough or sneeze, cover your nose and mouth with a flexed elbow or a tissue. Dispose of the tissue immediately and then wash your hands. If you notice someone has a fever and cough or other symptoms of respiratory illness, avoid close contact when possible. Let's all do our part to ensure that each and every Grenadian remains healthy. Our health is our collective responsibility.
The house was shaking. Then said the story here, babe. Crack, and the roof had gone.
Man, I was so scared, I nearly wet myself.
Only those who have lived it can truly understand the devastating fury of a hurricane's wind.
The house across the road just get up and roll over.
Hurricane force wind. It's a hazard. Hazards. Take control. Reduce your loss. You can hurricane-proof your home. For example, make your roof more wind-resistant by using screws instead of nails in its construction. Find out more about hurricane force winds and other hazards at your local disaster office.
A message from the National Disaster Management Agency and SEDERA.
So we take a word from our sponsors as we return. We want you to bear in mind that we have with us today cocoa tea, fresh natural cocoa that is made by the company Montparnasse Plantation. You can get a thrilling experience with chocolate. Chocolate as prepared by Tri-Island Chocolate. He does an interesting chocolate doc. He does one with bee pollen. Bee pollen, right? And he's adding superfood with superfood. And for those of you who would like to bathe with something natural, something Grenadian, we want you to consider using the Labonte product. This lady makes an interesting natural soap, all made in Grenada. And of course, the hot tea that we're drinking this evening, we're drinking some bush tea. We're doing a little, Doc is laughing a bit when he heard the combination, right? We're doing a little kojo root. We're doing a little zouti, right? We're doing a little stinging nettle. We heard. So Doc and I are testing, so don't go away with the impression that the doctor said drink this. He and I have prepared ourselves to be the guinea pig, so we're testing how this thing tastes. Would it really work, right? So we're testing out some recipes that we heard to determine how it goes down.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And the honey, of course, you'll get from Great Taste. We look forward to some of our other sponsors coming on board, and I invite you to stay tuned and be part of this exciting experience. If you have any comments, please feel free to share your comments via the social media platform. We have a technical team that will pick up your questions and comments and share them with us, and we'll share it with the rest of the viewers. But as we're back here on set, Doc, we want to examine the second question. Yourself and Dr. Mona touched on an important point, that when men visit the doctor, they themselves are not quite aware what issues to bring up. And so too, the providers are being guarded. So we need to inform our people in a deliberate way. What are some of the signs and symptoms of andropause? How do you know something is happening to you that you need to pay attention to?
Yeah, great. And before I deliberate on this, it's amazing how the bush tea actually tastes good. I was pleasantly amazed at how really nice it tastes.
Well, word from the doctor. It's sufficient, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder, is it because it's sweetened with the great taste honey?
Well,
We have a little great taste cinnamon
I think
honey.
both. I tasted it before I added the honey, and yes, the honey enhanced the taste.
Right.
But even without the honey, it was really, really nice blended,
Right.
nice taste.
So what I want to think and suggest, maybe we should begin to look at as a people. How do we determine the efficacy of some of these remedies in treating with some of these ailments? Now, there is a section of our population that is well able to fund a trip to the US or Trinidad to get some of the high-end treatments. What about the other brothers who are not so well endowed? Is there something we could recommend? We know that it's not a panacea, it wouldn't cure all ailments, but it may be able to bring some relief, some mitigation, and I think we should be deliberate in our communities to encourage our people to begin to investigate the efficacy of those remedies, right? They're not all far-fetched. So go ahead, Doc.
Well, of course,
signs and symptoms.
That could be another topic for another
day.
time. But the signs and symptoms of andropause, and I want men to really take a close look at this, because many of the times some of the complaints that they have can very well be andropause they don't know. Tiredness is one of those things. Just really weakness, tiredness, listlessness. Your bodies just don't have the kind of a drive that it accustomed having. The strength, you don't have the amount of strength that you usually have, and very frequently that is something that a man would mention to a doctor when he goes to a doctor. But not understanding that it could be part of andropause, he may say to the doctor, I feel a bit weak, he wants a supplement, and that's something that men always talk about. They want a supplement to kind of give them the energy without understanding that this may very well be part of andropause. Anxiety, not anxiety issues, but feelings or personality issues. Some people may get very depressed. Some guys get a bit anxious. That's a huge part of it. Loss of muscle mass. You just find that your muscles not as strong as it used to be. You might lose a bit of weight. That's a big one, because as a man you're accustomed with a certain weight that you have, and all of a sudden you find that you're not losing weight as you should. Your appetite may go down as a result of that. Your sleep pattern gets disturbed, and when sleep patterns get disturbed, your circadian rhythm in your brain gets disturbed. The stress hormones in your brain goes up, and that leads to a cascade of things that happens later on. Your blood pressure goes up as a result of that. Your blood sugar and cholesterol goes up as a result of that. So the expression of chronic disease become very, very much more acute during the period of andropause. So your blood pressure is higher than it normally would be. And then another huge one is loss of libido. Or a libido speaks to the feelings of wanting to make love, the feelings of wanting to have sex, the kind of a drive that you're accustomed having, that gets affected, and that has a very significant psychological effect on the man. And that psychological effect, as also our last program, is the beginning, or maybe the compounding of a serious erectile dysfunction that he may have been nursing since he was 30 anyway. Wow. And at that stage, things kind of blow out of control. So it's about the man losing that sense of well-being, or the decreased sense of well-being that he always know himself to be. Sense of comfort, a sense of confidence. He doesn't have that confidence anymore. He starts doubting himself in a lot of areas that he normally would be very confident in. So it's just a physical issue, loss of your weight, loss of muscle mass, libido issue, but also some emotional and psychological issue. And this is why I'm so happy we have Dr. Mona with us, to be able to dive into this a little bit later.
All right, very well. So we give way to Dr. Mona, because Doc, you touched on in your comments 2 points that resonate with me. Right, I'm speaking today because I've had an experience that I learned of. By the way, there wasn't for me a go-to place or a go-to person. Still, though, I was lucky in my experience, and I'll share it. But let me give way to Dr. Mona to put some light on what you've just discussed. We're looking at the signs and symptoms. What is it that a man should be aware of so that he could speak from an informed position, or his family should look out for, so they could make sense of what's happening to him and be able to seek help when help is warranted? So, Dr. Mona?
Absolutely. One of the big things that I think oftentimes is a misconception we also have to talk about is how depression and anxiety and stress present themselves. Oftentimes people assume depression and anxiety are just those feelings of like not being able to get out of the bed, not wanting to engage. But one of the overlooked signs of depression and anxiety and stress is actually anger and irritability. So not really having the bandwidth to deal with the normal day-to-day things of daily life, whether it's siblings, whether it's kids, whether it's your wife, your mom, just everyday things that you normally would push through and be able to work through are now just things that are just so frustrating to you and so irritating, and it's really hard for you to be able to just cope. And so if you're feeling very overwhelmed by basic things that previously you could handle on a day-to-day basis, whether it's relationships or engagement, that's something that we also have to pay attention to. But also the idea of just when you are going through changes with your body, when you wake up in the morning, what are the first things that you're thinking about? And how are you feeling when you wake up? Oftentimes, I think that's something that we often overlook. But when you wake up, what's the first thought that you have during the day? Before you go to sleep, what's the first thought you have? Or if you're experiencing insomnia and you cannot sleep and you have racing and reoccurring thoughts, those are also things that we have to pay attention to. When we talk about our body, oftentimes, as long as it's working really well, we don't pay attention to it. So there's certain things that we're not aware of. But what are the things in your body that may hurt? What are the things that are taking much more effort? And so when we're thinking about symptoms, I'm thinking about the idea of low energy. Dr. Martin spoke about low muscle mass, but also the idea of like what things in your body are changing. And I think in particularly for men, one of the things that we have to always pay attention to is literally knowing your body. Do you actually know your body, or do you just know that you're not in pain? There's a lot of different things that can happen, but the biggest thing that we want to pay attention to is discomfort. So what are the things that you're changing? And sometimes, Dr. Martin, you mentioned this, we may not see it first. It may take someone else, a friend, a family member. So it's really important to talk with someone and have a conversation with them and realize, I've realized that like you've been irritated lately, or you're anxious, or you're stressed. Opening up that conversation. I think that oftentimes, as we know, one man is not an island, but being able to have open communication about the changes that you see are really important, because sometimes when we're living with ourselves, we can't see those things. But it's much easier on the outside for someone to say, like, I've noticed these things, because they also lead to coping behaviors. And we want to have positive coping. So that's something like being able to go for a walk, being able to go for a hike, going to the beach, waking up early when it's really quiet and you're not overwhelmed by everything, versus the idea of coping with alcohol or other substances. Because oftentimes what people don't realize is one of the biggest things when we have a body is the body likes to be in equilibrium. The body wants to know, okay, what can I expect? So if you're drinking to go to sleep, your body's always going to expect that ethanol as a trigger to go to sleep. And when it's absent, it's going to be hard for you to go to sleep. So what are the healthy ways? So right now, Mr. Gavin and Dr. Martin are drinking tea. So what are the healthy things that you can do before you go to bed?
Doc, it leads me to ask a question, right? We discussed some signs and symptoms, things to look out for. But I think we must get down to the root and have a brief discussion on what really causes this andropause. And correct me if I'm wrong. When we speak of andropause and midlife crisis in men, are we speaking about the same thing?
Yes, essentially we're speaking of the same thing. I think the midlife crisis may be the psychosocial way of describing the impact that this thing has on men.
Right, right.
So, the psychologists would delve into that. But the actual cause of it is the fact that humans are finite in our existence. And so our body is one way when we're born, and we go through this bell-shaped curve of your body's physiology going up to its peak in different stages of your life, during adolescence, then during an early adulthood. And then your body takes this slow decline over time. And that slow decline in men seems to start after 30.
I heard you say something like that last time. I remember you speaking about a decrease.
That slow
1%, gentlemen, you have to look out at that 1% because it could harm you. Right? So we probably have to speak, Doc, about what is it we can do, what can men do to stem that decline? And the key word that surfaces here is this notion of the testosterone level I heard you speak of last
Right,
time.
yeah.
Okay.
The cause of it is that your testosterone naturally starts to decline at the age of 30, and you lose about 1% every year. So by 40 years old, you have already lost 10% of your testosterone. And certainly by 50, when your partner, the women are going through menopause during their 50s, I mean, they go through menopause, but at 50, a man has already lost 20% of his testosterone.
Wow.
And that's natural. That is how our body is naturally there to do. Our job now as physicians and men in a whole is to understand that fact and then try and put our efforts into knowing what it is I need to do to maintain my body. Dr. Mona spoke about men knowing your body. It is interesting. Men need to know their body. You need to understand how your body is going. Your body is not just about not feeling pain or feeling pain. So I mean, once they're not feeling pain, they feel they're okay.
Okay.
All right. So and so the discussion would have to be now, what do I do to maintain my testosterone levels? At one point in time, and I think Dr. Mona would be very much aware of this, that hormone replacement therapy or testosterone replacement therapy was a huge discussion in the United States for some years now, and that there are some back and forth discussion on it. There's for and against research. By and large, research is showing that this is a safe thing to do, but there are some natural and safe ways for men to improve their testosterone level, and I think that is a major part of what we want, lesson that we want men to discover tonight. Understanding that you are going through menopause, it's possible, and two, knowing what you can do to help maintain yourself and prevent yourself from having the negative aspect of andropause.
All right, very well. So it looks like a good time for us to take a break again, and we'll come right back and dive into some of these questions. We want to talk about the causes, the determinants. We're getting the sense that this is not something that you have control over. It happens to you. I'll share my story, right? And we'll speak about whether or not there is any scope for treating this as we go forward. We want to thank you for viewing. We look forward to you joining us the following Monday. Not this Monday, we meet every other Monday. And we have some exciting topics to discuss. Tune in next time. You will hear us speak about to be or not to be a cock sparrow. There are some myths.
This is Sammy coming back from Juve. Here comes Sammy again. This time, he is hurrying to join the fancy mass band. It is now after Carnival. Sammy and Robbie are liming on Wall Street.
Come on, Sammy, man. Guys, where you throwing your bull? Oh, you do have respect for the environment, or what?
Got just one bone and the dog eating that just now?
Well, yeah, not only dog, rat too. Throwing bone on the ground so those cause rodent. And besides, you don't looking good, man.
Oh God, man, I mean, this kind of talk you're spoiling the line, man. Relax yourself now.
I can't relax when you're dotting up the environment, so do the right thing.
All right.
Nice. Let me head for the garbage bin.
Let's keep our islands clean. Take your garbage with you if no bins are available. Don't throw garbage out of vehicles and on the streets. Stop, think, use the bins. A message from the Department of Tourism and the Grenada Tourism Authority.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're happy to have you viewing. Remember that we're here every other Monday, and tune in. One of these Mondays, we're going to be speaking about the myths of manhood, right? But tonight, we're focusing on menopause or womenopause, to menopause too, and there's a name for it, right? It's called andropause. In my experience, I wasn't aware of this thing. I had a bout with it, and Dr. Martin mentioned a few key pointers. Yeah, it does affect your self-confidence, right? It does cause you to question yourself. It does cause significant disruption, and we will discuss some of those things. But just as he mentioned, and I learned this from my mentor at work, the man who was able to tell me what was happening to me, and that's what motivated me to be on this program, because I felt I was lucky that there was somebody who knew and could have told me this is what is happening to you. And I did my research, and I learned about there being a you. And he said, when you go down in that you need to work hard to make sure when you come up on the other side, you're better than how you were before. I saw it in the books too. So he knew exactly what he was speaking about. I'm here because my confidence is restored. I'm singing a Bob Marley song these days. My mind is liberated, so I'm a liberated African man, right? And I could speak not for me. I'm speaking for the benefit of the other men. Those of you who were not as fortunate as I was, those of you who may be going through issues, and your best friend is not doctor, right. Something else.
Yeah.
Let's talk. What, if any, determines what type and how many symptoms a man experiences during andropause? And we have to talk about, can this thing be treated? Is it that it's going to just beat you, or there's a way to deal with it and come out on top? Let's talk. Let's hear from the doctors.
I mean, during the break, Dr. Mona and I had an interesting discussion about some of the predisposing factors, which delves into issues of genetic predisposition and so on. So,
right.
Dr. Mona, it'd be great to hear, what are the evidence you have on that end?
Very well.
Absolutely. So I think oftentimes we talk about the idea of nature versus nurture. So the idea of what do you know about your family history? What are the things that you've seen? So that's something, the idea of like genetic is what you're born with, what your DNA says, but the nature is the behavioral piece that is really impacted with who you grew up around. But I think another piece of that we often overlook is the idea of what are you eating? How are you sleeping? What are the trends? What job do you have? What is your work schedule like? One of the biggest things I think when we think about the developmental life pattern that is a huge gap in research everywhere is the idea that we really focus on pediatrics and young adults, but when it comes to later stages where andropause takes place, there's a gap. And so one of the biggest things that we really want to pay attention to is how, as Mr. Gavin said, are we preparing ourselves? But more than that, what are the things and the tools that we can use to better have an understanding of what's to come? And one of them that we really underutilize is talking with our families. So in addition to you being a part of your family, it's really important that we talk to our parents, our aunts and uncles, because oftentimes the things that they might have overlooked, whether it's something about their particular experience or something that you've seen, we don't talk about. A lot of times it's just absorbed by you being in the room and experiencing it. So you need to have candid conversations to know what to expect, because by talking to a grandfather and aunt and uncle about like, hey, what are the things that grandpa experienced or my uncle experienced, you can get insight into that. I think another issue that we also have to talk about is the idea of genetic. What do we know about our family history? I think that for me, one of the most important things is having a conversation with my parents about what to expect, what have we seen. And that's really important because I think one of the things that we oftentimes have to also pay attention to is what information is able to be given to us, whether that's because a grandparent has passed away or they were never involved in your life or a parent was never there. But all of those things, when we talk about andropause, it's really important to get as much information as possible. Oftentimes, there's also the idea of like I always mispronounce it.
Hypogonadism, yeah.
Thank you. Always pronounce it. It was one of those words I could never get. But the idea that genetically sometimes the drop in testosterone or lower levels of certain hormones is genetic. So that's it was happening for some people earlier than expected. So that's the idea, like some people losing their hair very early or losing losing strength in certain parts of their body, or even the ability of the idea of from erectile dysfunction. There's also the huge issue of fertility. There's a lot of things that can play into these. And so the idea of sometimes later in life, changes taking place, we need to be aware of it. And so there are many things that we can discuss in that realm. But one of the biggest things that I think is really important when we talk about research is really understanding your immediate environment and your family, and the things that you can learn from that.
Yeah, yes, and so what I could now say is that from a local standpoint and understanding the idiosyncrasies of what happens here, we know the term hypogonadism is a very scientific medical term and so on, but for the man who's experiencing
we have to say, break it down.
Yeah, he don't understand hypogonadism. It just means that he has definite signs and symptoms of low testosterone level. That's hypogonadism.
Wow.
And in some instances, even his testes is smaller than normal.
Wow.
He loses. So they say you don't have testicular fortitude, that it has long.
Heavy words, doctor. Heavy words. So, friends, we have to jump right into the next question. Doc, if that is the case, and my hombreness is being threatened, I need to know how to fix it. So, can andropause, can menopause, can this midlife crisis issue be treated, is the big question the ordinary man will have on his mind this evening.
Yeah, I mean, it can be treated, and this is where I think Dr. Qualis and myself have equal stake in understanding how to fix this issue, because while there are physical, medical discussions that can happen, then there is this huge psychological issue that must be dealt with, and understanding family and so on. Because if someone was born with genetic predisposition to low testosterone levels, or congenital abnormalities to low testosterone level, that person is going in with more risk of having negative effects. If that person's lifestyle, if that man's lifestyle was one that encouraged low testosterone level, he is already playing catch up when he goes into andropause.
Right.
So understanding that is important, and some of the things that puts men at high risk of andropause is if their lifestyle, for example, a lazy man is already at risk and set up to go through andropause.
Gentlemen, work hard.
A lazy man, because this is true. Testosterone builds when a man works.
You have to sweat.
Man was created to work.
Yes.
So lazy fellas,
predisposed.
Forget it.
Yeah.
You will lose it early.
Correct. So probably, Doc, what you're saying, it triggers me to think and consider. Probably a mason and a construction worker may not necessarily see the impact of this andropause as a man who's working in the office.
It's possible.
Because when you're doing the physical work,
yeah,
it's quite possible.
Yeah, we're not talking
there's
about
a mass.
Yeah, we're not
right
talking
there.
about mental work here. We're talking physical work.
Yeah.
So those of you who like to sit down in the office and don't want to exercise, I have some musician friends who only want to sit down and play guitar. They have to get up and exercise.
Right.
Physical stress and this is one time when I say working in a gym is probably not a bad idea, because that weightlifting, yes, it does improve testosterone levels. So if a man is going into andropause with those things, then that's fine. His diet. If a man is eating a good balanced diet with good foods that build testosterone levels, and we know the foods that helps to build testosterone level, again, he's going into life with a very good,
right? Yes, right.
And of course, that speaks into the treatment as well. Secondly, if a boy or a man is exposed to foods that kills testosterone, and here I'm speaking very specifically about two categories of foods.
I heard you last time.
Processed foods,
yes.
And the second one is soy-containing products.
Oh my, Doc, I remember you last time. Now, we had the impression, Doctor, that soy was good, that somebody told us once you're eating soy, you're all right. I listened to you keenly last time when you spoke about this issue, and there's a lot of education that our people need. One of the things that I would dare encourage is for us in Grenada to look at what's happening in the world around us. We see that war over in Europe is very disruptive. These people, the two countries I learned, Russia and Ukraine, produce about 30% of the grain that serves the world. What happens if this thing expands? How are we affected? In Grenada here, our people need to be looking at replacing imports.
Right.
What is the Grenadian substitute for soy? Right? And how do we get our people to embrace these things and change the taste, the palate? Right? We believe that, or it has often been said, buy local, eat local. We're in a position now where we need to more than talk, we need to act. And I want to encourage you friends to stay tuned. We have some of the members of our cooperative that actually do produce fresh products, and we'll have some of it on display as the doctor speaks about fresh food. We'll point you to some of the sources of some of those products. Remember that you can always get your honey from Great Taste, you'll get your chocolate from Tri-Island, you'll get your cocoa from Labonte, right? And you'll even bathe your splash around with the Labonte soap, right? But you have to eat healthy, you have to eat local, you have to eat natural is what I'm hearing the doctor saying. So let's move on, doc, right? Can it be prevented and how do we prepare? We will come back on those subjects after the break. It's been an interesting discussion so far.
COVID-19 spreads from person to person through the droplets that are produced when someone coughs or sneezes, which makes it easy to spread between people in close contact. Now let's get prepared to stay healthy. To reduce your chance of catching or spreading COVID-19, practice these simple everyday preventative measures. Droplets can also land on surfaces, so ensure that you wash your hands frequently for a minimum of 20 seconds or sing the happy birthday song twice. Avoid touching your face, especially your eyes, nose, and mouth. If soap and water are not readily available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with an alcohol content between 60 and 90%. 70% is ideal. When you cough or sneeze, cover your nose and mouth with a flexed elbow or a tissue. Dispose of the tissue immediately and then wash your hands. If you notice someone has a fever and cough or other symptoms of respiratory illness, avoid close contact when possible. Let's all do our part to ensure that each and every Grenadian remains healthy. Our health is our collective responsibility.
The house was shaking. Then started story here, babe. Crack, and the roof had gone.
Man, I was so scared, I nearly wet myself.
Only those who have lived it can truly understand the devastating fury of a hurricane's wind.
The house across the road just get up and roll over.
Hurricane force wind. It's a hazard. Hazards. Take control. Reduce your loss. You can hurricane-proof your home. For example, make your roof more wind-resistant by using screws instead of nails in its construction. Find out more about hurricane force winds and other hazards at your local disaster office.
A message from the National Disaster Management Agency and SEDERA.
Welcome back. We have let's take a moment to share some comments that came in on social media. We have someone saying they have some questions. And quickly we could look at this. How should a wife deal with her husband going through andropause or ED? Somebody is asking for some help. The second part of their question, is there anything a man can do to fix or heal ED? I think we will answer that question in tune. So viewers, stay tuned. The doctors here will shed some light on your questions. discussing how a wife would work and how a man. But we have an area that we want to give Dr. Mona a chance to lead a discussion on. We're looking at the final wrap-up questions. Can it be prevented at this andropause, right? And how can men prepare for it? And Dr. Mona shared some thoughts that we think you should hear as we move in. We welcome you back to the set, and we look forward to you joining us in our subsequent series. So Dr. Mona, share with us, please, on the question, can it be prevented? And then how can men prepare for andropause? Go ahead, Doc.
So I would like to start off by saying that life is a process.
Okay.
So it cannot be prevented. Everything that happens to us is a process. Our whole goal is, how do we prepare? How do we adapt? How do we make sure that aging is something that we enjoy and not something that people are running from and being fearful of? And so when we talk about changes in life, it is going to happen. Your body is going to change. Everything's going to change. Your muscle mass is going to change. But we want to make sure that as you get to those stages of life, it can be graceful. You can enjoy it. We want to make sure that everything you're thinking and feeling and your behavior is productive. We want to make sure that if you go through this stage, that you still are making sure that you have your communities, you have your support systems. I think one of the big things that we really have to focus on is talking to each other. When you are able to speak to someone or in a group of people and you know that your experience is shared, you don't feel so ostracized. You don't feel so alone. We've had a rough 2 years. The borders were closed in Grenada, as in other countries. We weren't able to see family members. We weren't able to do things that we enjoy. If you want to go out in Lime, if you want to go out and just enjoy yourself, there was a lockdown. And so right now, a lot of things are coming to the light because things have been different for the past 2 years. And so I definitely know stateside, when we experience this summer where things are beginning to open back up, one of the biggest things from my end that I'm trying to encourage a lot of people to do is really to engage with healthcare professionals. During the past 2 years, a lot of people avoided the hospital because it was really ground for COVID. So they forgot to do their annual checkups. They're not making sure that they are doing, if they need to have a prostate exam, if they need to check in with their body. Follow up with your physicians, engage in those relationships. But also in your communities and in your families, start having much more conversations about life and about the things that you're scared of and the things you're excited for. Life should be enjoyed. It's a natural process. We're not always going to be young, but there are some wonderful perks that come with aging. And we hope that, you know, with all of this, the wisdom that's gained. One of the biggest things that I think we also have to pay attention to is the reality that when we talk about what does it mean to be a man, we do not want that to be something narrow. Men are also a strong part of our community. They are beacons of knowledge, they are beacons of support. And so how do we widen the definition of what it means to be a man? What you can offer your community, what you can offer yourself. It shouldn't just be focused on the idea of a drop in testosterone and the fear of erectile dysfunction and the fear of that, what can you do if you don't have these physical strengths that you once did. We really want to expand that definition. So the idea that as you transition to a new phase in life, there should be excitement there. There should be a conversation about all the things that you can offer the community and all the things you want to offer them. But it really does focus on our idea of coming together and really restructuring how we think of and how we define within that community, the idea of what it means to be a man. And as we progress through life, how do we adapt and really begin to engage with these changes?
So we are concluding that this is a process that will happen to you. There isn't anything you could really do to change it. What is a thought to keep in mind is that it doesn't impact every man in the same way. The studies have shown that about 20% or so of men have experiences that are noteworthy, just as a certain percentage of women have experiences that are noteworthy with menopause. All women will come to a point when their period will cease, right? So it's a natural process. If you're affected, there are some things that you should keep in mind to prepare for it. And we want to close our discussion by looking at some of those activities or concerns or considerations one should keep in mind. When we meet next time, we will be discussing to be or not to be a cock sparrow. But to close now on discussion of how can men prepare for this stage. I was instructed being here to learn that there are some adult stages in life that we weren't told about. We had the impression that from little child, we know of infant and we know of toddler, and we know of teenager, and we know the symptoms and signs. We got the impression, I got the impression that once you're 21 and you're adult, the next thing is dead. Old man. I learned the hard way that there are some steps in between that have changes with them that affect you in a very deliberate ways. They could be far-reaching changes, right? So, Doc, how can we prepare?
You know, I mean, from an academic standpoint and educational standpoint, the process is a long one. And as we begin this discussion, a decade from now, I'm pretty sure there'll be great medical and discoveries and guidelines set up to help men to deal with this issue. But within the Grenadian context right now, to help men right now prepare for this andropause, I think probably one of the easiest things to be done that will give you the biggest impact is that right now, men groups needs to start discussing this.
My goodness. So
men groups.
We are on the ball. We've dared raise this discussion about this issue that's been dead. As an educated man, I have bachelor's degree, I have master's degree. I didn't know the word andropause at all. So men have to talk about
groups,
the issue. Right?
Cricket groups.
Yes.
Football groups.
Right. So
clubs. Churches.
Churches.
That discussion has to start in church.
Right.
And this old thinking that the Christian man is the head and big and strong and nothing can happen to him.
Wow.
We have to crash that idea. Sit down and talk with your congregation and the population
about the issues.
So men groups need to start talking, and places and companies that has a lot of men in there, they need to talk again.
So it's probably why, Doc, we paid attention to target some of the unions.
Yep, construction companies.
We paid attention to target, even the police had an interest in what we were doing because they have a high preponderance of males, right? And I'm happy that our conversations are being recorded because they're available for interested stakeholders to replay to their audiences and impart that information. We didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know who to turn to because it doesn't exist. And what we hope to come out of this engagement is for us to be deliberate now about putting the structures in place so that our people could be informed. I'll tell you the truth. Because this gentleman told me what was happening to me and I investigated, I learned about the andropause. The literature wasn't Caribbean.
Right.
Somebody else wrote.
Yes.
And we have to now put systems in place so that we could take care of our people and give them the information and the support that they need, because I'm learning from the doctor, we're not special. Once you're a human being, you're predisposed to this experience because it's a natural part of life.
Absolutely. And if we start the discussion among men groups, and we encourage men to keep exercising, and we ask men to stop eating as they're eating now, and I hope when we get to the myths of manhood, we're going to really delve into what men are eating.
Boy, that's a hot topic.
Myths of manhood, yes. And the men eat properly, they eat local, and eat food that are really beneficial to the men at the amount of protein and strength that they need, foods for that purpose. I think that's a great way of helping men in their 30s and 40s right now to prepare for andropause. And maybe a focus on men in their 30s should probably be where I think we get the biggest impact right now as we prepare men to go into andropause.
Andropause. Right. Viewers, we want to thank you for taking the time to share with us this evening. It was really exciting having Dr. Francis Martin, share with us. I wish, however, to give our colleague all the way in the United States, that's Dr. Mona Qualis, a few minutes, Doc, to tell us about yourself. I looked at your profile briefly and I saw, Dr. Qualis, that you were working all the way in South Africa. So we want to know what this Grenadian star, by the way, viewers, Dr. Qualis is Grenadian. She's from Birch Grove, and we're so happy that our people out there in the diaspora are tapping in and making their contribution. Doc, we want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to engaging with yourself and your colleagues in the future as we put these mechanisms to respond to the things that we speak about in place. Right? So, Doc, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. You've been all the way in South Africa doing work, and we're happy that you've taken the time to do things back home. Doc?
Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I am a health psychologist. I have been working in the health sphere in academia and research for over a decade now. And my passion has always been community work. So the work that I was doing specifically in South Africa was about community health and engagement. I was working with a center that was really a health clinic. So we did everything from support groups. So just as Dr. Martin mentioned, the ability to have support groups for men and women, what they needed. We also are working with a clinic. We also are working with children and really trying to work within family systems to address a lot of the chronic illness that was there, which was a lot of communicable diseases. And I have also done work in Jamaica. I've also done work in the South, throughout Nashville, and in the North here in New York, and have also been to Nigeria. So I've been traveling a lot and doing a lot of work wherever there's really the diaspora. I have traveled to, and I hope to continue to do so. A lot of my work has been in the community because I firmly believe that we can strengthen our health occupation. Oh, and I've also been to Cuba and had work done there. I forgot about that. And Cuba has a wonderful example of what it really means to do community health work. And so I strongly and firmly believe that the community is really the way that we help and heal, whether that's through conversation, whether that also is through the foods that we eat. I think that that's a really important thing that we have to pay attention to. But particularly for me, coming to Grenada as a child and throughout the years has always just been an experience that has taught me so much. I think one of the earliest memories that I have is going to my grandmother's house in Birchgrove, and the idea that everyone knew each other, the idea that it has just been the community that my parents had when they were growing up has followed them wherever they have lived. So whether they have been in England or whether they have been in the United States, they see someone from Birchgrove and they're always excited, and there's always that unity there. And that's something I've always looked up to. And so for me, my passion for community has been since I was a young child, but also today, of just the joy of what it means to live and breathe and work with those that we love and who know us the most. And how do we strengthen that to make sure that it really sustains and survives and is strengthened throughout the years.
Well, Doc, we're very happy to have had you join us from the United States. I learned a new word also, Doc, last time, that the young man that was with us, that's Akeem, he is a community nutritionist. So I'm getting the sense that there is now a trend towards putting some emphasis in the community, and we want to encourage our people, as Doc is saying, to start that conversation. Men are not known or disposed to speak about their issues, but it's through conversation that you learn. So I'll tell you a little secret. One gentleman mentioned that stinging nettle is good for managing the size of the prostate. Because he spoke, another man chimed in, no, it's not one stinging nettle, you have to take 3. So stinging nettle and zooty, and then mountain nettle, right? Through conversation, another man said, oh, what really worked for me? And Doc, he mentioned something about PSA.
Right.
Right, and that number. This guy said his number was up, but because he was using the kojo root and the trumpet bush, right? Now, talk is talk. It wouldn't work for everybody. But because there is conversation, people could learn, people could share, people could experience, and people could know. Through conversation this evening, we engaged you and bringing to your attention that there is something that affects men called andropause. And it's real. It has some far-reaching impacts, and you should know because it could possibly affect you. You could be one of the 15% that is impacted. We want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening, Doc. Thank you for coming on board. Dr. Qualis, we want to thank you, and we want to also thank our sponsors, La Bonte. We want to thank Tri-Island Chocolate. We want to thank Great Taste. We want to thank MAP. And come next week, we're going to have some more sponsors on board, and this thing is going to burgeon and get big. And we have to listen to the doctor. Doctor said in Grenada, we have to now move to take action. Thank you all, and we look forward to meeting with you next time. God bless.